Hezbollah says it's fired dozens of rockets into northern Israel, this in retaliation for a deadly strike in South Lebanon. Tensions have been spiking. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dispatching two of his top advisors to Washington. They'll be meeting with National Security Council Chief Jake Sullivan and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken later this Thursday. Monty Francis has more.
Simmering cross-border tensions between Israel and Lebanon and fears it could be reaching a boiling point. The Israeli army approved plans on Tuesday to launch a military operation in Lebanon after months of deadly rocket attacks and airstrikes between Israel and the militant group Hezbollah. The Iran-backed group sent a warning that Lebanon would be ready to fight a regional war, even though it does not want the war to expand.
Israel knows that no place will be safe from our missiles and our drones, and our strikes are not indiscriminate. Israel knows that we have a list of targets, and we have the ability to reach these targets, and we will shake the foundations of Israel.
For the first time, Nasrallah also threatened to strike Cyprus, an EU country, which has hosted Israeli forces for training drills.
Cyprus should be warned that opening Cypriot bases and airports to the Israelis to target Lebanon means that the Cypriot government has become part of the war.
This comes one day after a U.S. envoy met Lebanese and Israeli officials in a desperate attempt to stop a full-scale conflict. But drone footage released by Hezbollah Tuesday showing potential strike targets in northern Israel prompted the foreign minister to say, in an all-out war, Hezbollah will be destroyed and Lebanon severely beaten. Since the October 7th attacks by Hamas in Israel, cross-border fighting between Hezbollah and the Israeli army has been ongoing, killing at least 16 soldiers and 11 civilians on the Israeli side and over 400 people on the Lebanese side, most of whom were Hezbollah fighters.
Now, taking a look at Gaza, amid the dangers of delivering food aid, there are the hazards of smugglers, and in particular, cigarette smugglers.
What the Israeli military says is 1,200 trucks worth of aid.
This is Wall Street Journal reporter Dov Lieber who filed a story along with his colleagues about the situation going in from the Kerem Shalem crossing amid the moves by the Israelis to have these daily tactical pauses to bring in aid. There are the logistical questions, and yeah, there's dealing with those smugglers. Dov Lieber, who now joins us from Jerusalem. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
You write in this story, you quote a Palestinian man near the central Gaza city of Han Yunis, as saying he saw armed men on aid trucks open 3 bags of flour that had fallen out of the trucks to check them carefully. What were they looking for?
Well, they were looking for cigarettes. Cigarettes have become extremely valuable in Gaza. Obviously, they're an addictive habit for many people. But ever since Israel took control of the Rafah crossing last month, they've had trouble getting cigarettes into the enclave. That means there's very few left. And now the price of a single cigarette has skyrocketed to $25. So, you know, there are smugglers who are trying to get more cigarettes into Gaza. And so each one of those packages...
So wait, hang on a sec. Why is it that getting cigarettes through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt is easier than getting it through from Israel?
Well, because Israel just has better control over its own crossing. They had some kind of system that it was easier to get it through Rafah. But either way, why the price is skyrocketing has to do with the fact that there's just less in the enclave, and that happened since last month after Israel took control of the Rafah crossing. So the skyrocketing price of cigarettes are connected to that in some way.
And just how high are the prices?
So, like I said, they're $25 for each cigarette today. So a pack is worth a lot of money. a whole package worth even more. And this is the type of contraband that smugglers are trying to get into Gaza through aid convoys. And that's what causing those aid convoys to be attacked, because now it's not clear if the people on the other side in Gaza know where the cigarettes are stashed. They may not always know, which means that they're going after many different types of aid convoys, and that makes it very dangerous for them to go to the border with Israel where the aid is being transferred into Gaza, picking up that aid, and as they go back into Gaza, they're getting attacked.
So researching for this story, Dov, have you been able to get a sense, I know this isn't an exact science, but who's in charge in Gaza? Do the smugglers control the militant groups? Do the militant groups control the smugglers? Or do they each work in a parallel universe?
It's a very good question. I'd like to answer that question, but a lot of it would be based on speculation. We don't have clear evidence as to who's running the smuggling on each side. I mean, we know the cigarettes are coming from Egypt, so we assume Egyptians are involved in some way. On the other side,
when you say the Egyptians, who do you mean?
We don't mean the Egyptian government or anything like that. We mean maybe criminal elements on the other side, who are working with criminal elements inside of Gaza. This is the best understanding that we have so far.
So they're the ones profiting. Who else is profiting? Do we know the answer to that question?
We don't know the answer. We just know we don't know. We don't know the answer.
And what we've seen, I mean, this war is now in its 9th month. There's been a desperate situation when it comes to humanitarian aid, and there's also been a lot of looting. The Financial Times reporting this week that armed gangs have plundered at least $120 million in the past 2 months from banks in the Gaza Strip. Why now the spike in plundering banks?
Well, it all has to do with the growing lack of law and order. And that's also connected, by the way, to the whole cigarette situation. I mean, the cigarettes are just the latest and most potent manifestation of prior looting. I mean, this isn't the first looting we're seeing in Gaza. Before, it may have been for food or for diapers or stuff like that. But the more time that there's no clear sovereign power inside Gaza, the stronger the lack of law and order becomes, and the more this lawlessness grows, and the more these criminal elements can operate inside Gaza and take advantage of the situation.
After working on this story, how do you understand Israel's announcement of tactical pauses?
Well, that has to do with the fact that, and this is according to speaking to both the Israelis and the United Nations and the aid groups, is that, you know, the aid groups have been telling Israel, look, it's not safe for us to go pick up the aid. It's a problem. You know, there's over 1,200 trucks worth of aid just sitting on the border with Israel. No one's picking it up, even though there's this food scarcity is a huge problem in Gaza, but they can't get to the aid because they say it's dangerous. So what Israel said is, we'll make a safe route. We won't fight along this tactical route that goes from the border with Israel through southern Gaza into this north axis road where they can reach much of the rest of the enclave. So this is why Israel has announced these daily pauses during the daylight hours to try to facilitate, to help these aid groups get to the border safely. But what we heard from the aid groups is that, you know, this problem of the looting is the safe route doesn't necessarily solve that. That has to do with the regular hostilities between Israel and Hamas, but the general lack of law and order is a whole other problem.
Yeah, because this aid route goes from what? The southeast corner of the Gaza Strip, partially north, but not really. Makes it as far as central Gaza, roughly.
Well, they make it to this road that basically bisects the entire strip. So, you know, they're basically trying to facilitate the trucks from getting to the Israel border to the area where they can then, you know, reach most of the rest of the enclave.
And what you're saying begs the question of, at this point in time, who is in charge of securing the food aid routes and the food distribution?
that has been a major, one of the most important points of contention now for many months inside Gaza. The problem is Israel does not want to be responsible for guarding the aid or distributing the aid. I mean, this is a potentially combustible situation. It puts Israeli soldiers in danger. And I should note, in other conflict zones, usually it's private contractors who are in charge of security. And that's what, by the way, the aid groups say they're willing to do, to get private contractors. But they say, you know, they need a little help from the Israelis here. I should note, by the way, that commercial trucks going into Gaza have now far outpaced the aid. So commercial enterprise, people who are willing to take a higher risk to make a profit on what they're bringing into Gaza, they're moving more things from Israel into Gaza. But that's because they have a higher tolerance risk. But this just basically controversy over who should be in charge of making sure there's law and order in Gaza, who should be in charge of guarding these aid convoys. I mean, it's a bone of contention, and it's one that has been, I think, there's no clear answer. And I know the Israelis are trying to help bring in private contractors. I know that the aid groups are trying their own things, but you know, the situation there is just extremely difficult, and the lack of any kind of sovereign power there, any kind of police network, I just think makes things very difficult.
Dov Lieber, when you sort of list the priorities right now, you have trying somehow to revive truce talks. You have the tensions at Israel's border with Lebanon, and what we've been talking about, which is feeding the people of Gaza. What would a fly on the wall in those talks in Washington between top Israeli and U.S. officials probably tell us about what is the top priority right now for this Biden administration?
Well, I think we don't even need to be a fly on the wall to know what the top priority for the Biden administration is. It's to end the war. I mean, President Biden said it himself, the war needs to end. They're trying every which way to get it to end, but unfortunately, it's not up to the Biden administration. It's up to the warring powers here between Israel and Hamas. I mean, there's a deal on the table. Israel says it's ready to go with the deal. Hamas is still trying to negotiate a better deal for itself. And as all the previous deals before and all the previous negotiations in the prior months, the outlook doesn't look good, just because it's very simple. Israel wants all its hostages home before the war ends. Hamas wants to end the war before it releases the hostages. So they're kind of stuck in this potentially irreconcilable situation. But, you know, negotiations is all about finding ways to make the irreconcilable reconcilable. And, you know, there's still a chance that these negotiations could work. Now, what the Biden administration is working on is trying to find some kind of points of leverage over Hamas and potentially over Israel as well to try to get this deal forward. But, you know, I think they're struggling.
And just one final very brief question. Your newspaper reporting this Thursday that there may be as few as some 50 hostages left alive in the Gaza Strip?
That's right. That's what my colleagues reported today. We've known for a while now that potentially a majority of the hostages are no longer alive. I mean, this actually is one of the reasons why the negotiations for a ceasefire are so difficult, because the kind of the goalposts of how many hostages are released at what phase keeps changing. Because Hamas is slowly learning how many of their chips or the hostages are still on the table.
Dov Lieber of the Wall Street Journal, many thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Stay with us. There's more to come, including our exclusive report from on this World Refugee Day from the border between Sudan and South Sudan. That's coming up.